My name is Dan Tawczynski. Some of you might know me from Taft Farms. I've been running that place for a lot of years now. I'm retired. I still go in, still work. The farm is part of me. I'm part of the farm. My son is running it now, doing a good job too, I might add. But I'm not here to discuss the farm today. For any number of years, since I was a kid, I used to write. First little stories, whatever. Got to high school, wrote a couple of things, nothing of any major consequence. And as I taught school for a while, I did some writing. And then when I left to become a full-time farmer, the winters were long. And so I sat down and did some more writing. The book Green, of which I have a copy here and a poster, was the first one I've published of stories of growing up on a farm in a small town, and the things we liked to do and things we didn't do. Things like the first day of trout season, which used to occur on April 15th. Funny about that, that's also tax day. So everybody who was missing from work at their jobs that day said they were doing their taxes. I'm sure they were. That's why they were elbow to elbow on most of the better trout streams in the area. But at any rate, that was one of my stories. But the one that really launched me into it was when I sat down to write a little piece about why I am a farmer today when there were other opportunities. I really felt like there was someone else guiding me in writing it. This story first appeared as a letter to the editor in the Berkshire Eagle, and it got picked up by a couple of national magazines because it's from the heart. I'll read it to you now. I called it originally Green Corn, and when the editors of the book read that story, they said, that has to be the title of your book. So we simply called it Green, which is available on Amazon and from local bookstores here in the area. But this is Green. As the seasons inevitably descend through the autumn of my years, necessity forces me to hand off responsibilities that were once mine alone. The time has come to pass the torch, or maybe it's the hoe. Friends, associates, and even sometimes family ask, why did I stay with farming? With so many other opportunities to financially advance came and went. I could have gone in other directions, even after the choice had been made. Occasionally tempted by attractive, substantial offers, I could be a wealthy man today, and I am, though my wallet often suffers stress. I can't say moving on hasn't crossed my mind. Lucrative opportunities have a way of presenting themselves when most difficult to resist. Any farmer is tempted when winter seems to go on forever, and the growing pile of unpaid bills gnaws at your soul. Longer light, warmer temperatures do arrive eventually. Nothing compares with spring fever on a farm. A few sunny days and the buds of life burst forth, restoring a spark of life even the most weary of souls cannot ignore. When weakened by a seemingly relentless depression, in spring, one can find a smile and a new determination. There is nothing so intoxicating as the perfume of freshly turned fertile soil. Perhaps it's the promise that this will be the year. Good fortune has found a way to smile on me whenever I approached a major crossroad. Often the guiding signpost revealed itself in the form of the right individual who just happened by to help me make the right decision, whether he realized it or not. The least likely encounters often leave the deepest impressions. When I was a child, maybe only 6 or 7 years old, an elderly neighbor gave me words to live by. Now, some might remember Harry Ram as the man who always picked his sweet corn before the 4th of July. I have yet to accomplish this, despite farming some of the same ground. Mr. Ram was regarded by most adults as somewhat of a curmudgeonly character, but I always thought of him as a wise elder. He told me the best fertilizer for a field was a good, sincere smile. If you were having a bad day, it was best to stay away. Well, he must have smiled a lot, because he's the most successful grower I've ever known. In the spring of 1955, my mother and father split up. A nasty separation had left deep scars on my young mind. I don't know if adults realize what happens to a child when his world is destroyed. Perhaps if they did, they'd find a way to inflict less pain on those they claim to love. Well, 2 things saved me from going insane: my dog and my gardens. My dog sensed trouble and was never far from my side, and working the soil gave me a healing no human contact could approach. I was entering high school when another epiphany occurred, in the person of a man I only knew as Fred. A kindly gent I conversed with almost weekly as he came to retrieve his equally elderly life from the clutches of her hairdresser, my mother. By this time, my summer job was almost 4 acres of garden, the results of which I sold from my small roadside market. From planting and growing to harvest and sales, I did everything, often under conditions less than desirable. If I didn't do it, it didn't get done, no matter what it was. While my friends were swimming and playing ball, and later doing what teenagers did, I worked my gardens. One particularly hot day in June, Fred worked his way out to where I was hoeing potatoes. On in his years, he needed a cane in each hand, arthritis and an old injury having taken the inevitable toll. After required small talk about the ungodly heat, he asked me what I was intending to study in college, because he heard this was why I kept the gardens. Engineering, was my prompt reply. Well, the Russians had been launching Sputniks, and the president had called for a mobilization in the sciences. I'd always designed and built my own model aircraft and crude rockets, a pastime with which my business was sometimes forced to compete. I viewed becoming an engineer as an avenue toward making my hobby into a career. No, Fred replied, you're going to be a farmer. Any engineer would find a way not to work in this heat. He'd make some excuse. You know what real work is. I progressed through high school, taking all the advanced math and science courses offered, but still, I kept up the farming. If anything, my little farm increased, mostly because it held promise of a revenue stream to help with future expenses. By the time I was ready for college, world events in the military-industrial relationship President Eisenhower had warned us about tripped my engineering switch into the off position. A high school teacher advised me to be more analytical than accepting. He encouraged me to make decisions based on observation and research, not just what someone told me. Fighting a war in Asia made no sense. Not wanting to become another cog in this wheel, I gravitated to the arts and eventually graduated with an English degree and a teaching certificate. I took a job as a junior high English instructor and found myself teaching more than grammar and literature. My curriculum was based on what I felt kids needed to know, especially about a war in a place where many would lose their innocence, some their lives. The approved courses were irrelevant to youth considered disposable by their elders. I taught, too, how to tell time on an analog clock. Others how to use a phone book. No one had ever bothered. More than once, this approach put me in hot water. But all I could think about was Falstaff's line to Prince Hal. Cannon fodder, sire, cannon fodder. I would return to the farm after school and take out my frustrations on weeds and pests because I knew many of my students would be swept up in the draft. You know, I'd never given it much thought, but one of the reasons I chose teaching, it permitted me to remain a farmer in the summer. The farm was saving my sanity. Completely burned out by futility, I left the teaching profession after a little more than 3 years to pursue the farm full time. Revulsion at war and world politics may have been a reason not to pursue engineering, but Fred had been right. My release from personal tension was the good earth. To this day, when heavy thinking is needed, I pick up a hoe or a rake or some other tool and work the soil to pull weeds or nurse a struggling plant. I have to get closer to the earth to take advantage of the therapy that fertile ground has always offered. Well, years pass too quickly. My business grows like Topsy. The KISS principle long since violated, and another remarkable individual leaves his mark. Bill Cole was a native New Hampshireite, a rugged individualist by any definition, and a jack of all trades. He always had a kind word and a friendly smile, never looking to find fault. He was also one of the most intelligent people I've ever met, a near genius, uncorrupted by formal education. It was a particularly busy day at the store, my whole family helping. My wife is in the kitchen, 2 daughters out front with customers, Keith, then almost 15, sweating in the field with a corn-picking crew. 6-year-old Paul amused himself playing in the stream that flowed near the store. He knew better than to bother the rest of us, and no matter how dirty he could get, there was always a bath before bed. Well, business bordered on insanity. One of those days when if everything goes well, you might find a way to pay a few bills. I was being pulled in a dozen directions when a female scream pierced the din. My little one was showing a fashionably dressed woman from the city the giant bullfrog he had just caught. I don't know whether the woman was screaming about the frog or my son. He was dirty, like he'd been cleaning a furnace or maybe playing in crude oil. I never knew dirt could stick to anyone like the way he was wearing it. Customers reacted as if mass murder was taking place, and I was about to lose it all when Bill laughed, uttering profound words of wisdom. You know, there just ain't no better place to bring up kids than on a farm. Well, the customers got over their initial fright and started laughing. Soap and water, a lot of both, would clean up the child, and shortly the frog was safely returned to the stream. But more importantly, I was shown another reason why this way of life was so precious. At one time, it would have been all about me, my dreams, my goals. But now the only thing that really mattered was being a good parent and doing what was best for my family. Though life on the land is a good thing with a generous helping of hard work, stress thrown in for flavor, it's without a doubt the best that any child can hope for. If I'd gone to work for some mega corporation living in the city or the suburbs, could my children have ever had the experience, the appreciation for food, the learning about life that comes from a farm? Could I have lived with myself and my family knowing that I was just adding to the wealth of some nameless individuals that already had more money than they or their offspring could ever spend? Harry, Fred, and Bill have all gone on to their rewards, but the lessons learned from each remain forever. You know, the Shakers had it right. Nothing is so profound as simplicity. A few times in my life, I've been privileged to witness a phenomenon I have yet to adequately describe. It can occur at any time in the growing season, but most often in June when the days are longer. That time of the year when on a warm night you can hear the corn grow. For no apparent reason, you find yourself surrounded by a green mist, A vaporous substance just defies description. It envelops and swirls about you, seemingly with a mind of its own. I thought I was going crazy at first. But when it happened again, and a third time, I knew better. Any person is changed after experiencing what I can only call an earth miracle. One time, my mother and father, now reconciled, were with me when it happened. They both said they felt a rapture, but could not explain it. It was like seeing, holding hands with God, and receiving validation that what you're doing is the right thing. Years ago, I wrote about this phenomenon in a letter to a local newspaper. Farmers responded that on occasion they'd been witness to it as well. One woman wrote she'd experienced it with her father, who had seen it with his father. A national agricultural magazine picked up the story. I received letters from all over farm country, many of them saying I didn't want to say anything because people would think I was going nuts. I'm convinced you have to be a farmer to see that color green. No artist can capture it. Poets find themselves inadequate. The words don't exist. The closest, most similar event I've ever witnessed was on the plains of Africa, the day after the rains came. What was brown and dry suddenly became lush and alive in a matter of hours. A transformation nothing short of miraculous. If there is a God, he speaks to me through that green mist, that corn, and we receive validation for what we've chosen as our life's work. That green mist, that green corn, are greener than the back of any dollar bill I've ever held in my hand. When someone asks me why I keep farming, I just smile. I'm the wealthiest person I know. Well, that story was written from the heart, and it sums up, it was the start. I mean, this one, I think you can say adequately, I felt someone's hand writing it for me. And I just felt after that I have a responsibility to write down some of the other things that have happened and some of the stories from my childhood. And many of them are in this book, Green. And I know I've heard a lot of good reports from people. It hasn't been distributed widely. It is available on Amazon. Unfortunately, because of the title, you have to put the subtitle in there as well, because green is so generic. You start getting things about how to make your lawn greener when you type this in. But you have to type in Green, a reflection on love and loss, through a lifetime of lifetime relationship with the land. And you do that, and it comes right to it. I also have it available at the store, and it's available from local bookstores here in Berkshire County. Recently, I also participated with a group of authors where we wrote a serial novel for the Berkshire Edge. I think this past Sunday finished up the last installment of it. It's called Artificial Insanity, and all of us had a great time writing it. I would think it would be a good idea to pick up go online and you get the Berkshire Edge and you can read it chapter by chapter by chapter. It's all available. It's an interesting little introspection on what happens when your life is turned upside down. I have another book in the works right now. I don't have a title for it, but it'll be coming out sometime this summer, I hope. We're hoping for the July 4th weekend. It's also another collection of stories and a little bit of travelogue. I have a large fictional piece. I won't say it's science fiction, but it's futuristic. somewhat dystopian, and that will be coming out hopefully within a year. I have travel logs, and I have another project in mind that I would like to put out. When I was a child, I only knew one grandparent. All the others were gone before I came on the scene, and I was the youngest in my family by a long ways. My father was the youngest in his family by a long ways. And this grandparent, who was born in 1880, fought in the Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905. And he survived the siege of Port Arthur. You can look that up online. It was quite a siege. I've done a lot of research on it, and almost nothing that is said as the official history is what jives with what he told me. In fact, when the siege was lifted, he worked his way mostly by walking. He walked the full width of Siberia and Russia to get back to Poland. And when he got back to Poland, he was regarded as a traitor. How? Why? Because he dared to survive. He wasn't supposed to. Only the Russian officers were meant to survive. He told me stories of that journey, and I'm looking for more stories of that journey to compile a book, because the official history, as most official histories, are written by the winners. The winners write. His story is different, and I want to get that one out there. I have a few other little things here. There's one story. Some of you might remember this fellow. It's a quick one. It's written about a fellow who lived right here in this area and did a lot of work with soup kitchens and homeless shelters in the area. It's about a fellow named Herman Nichols. Some of you might remember him as Mr. Nick. This is going to be in the new book that's coming out. Some months ago, Herman Nichols of Otis passed away after a long illness. His loss noted by the press in the usual fashion, but the full significance of his life and loss was felt by a much larger part of our community, the invisible society. Call them the homeless, the poor, the just plain unlucky. These are the people you see everywhere but hardly ever recognize. Most work at regular jobs, not the ones that pay well, at least well enough to properly support a family. Fast food handlers, store clerks, especially at big box stores, security guards, they're all essential to society, but tend to be paid at the low end of the scale. Herman, Mr. Nick to those who knew him, trod an unlikely path to his connection with the Invisibles. In World War II, he took part in some of the heaviest fighting, a veteran of the Battle of the Bulge. When recalling these times, his expression would evolve from sadness or determination to one of laughter. He recalled how the frozen ground made digging a foxhole impossible. So he and his companions would wait for a German artillery shell to dig it for them. Lying prone in the snow and cold near a destroyed chateau, they waited for an incoming shell, hoping it would not land too close. Jumping into one of these craters that seemed deeper than it ought to be, he found he'd uncovered a wine cellar filled with cheese, sausages, and, of course, wine. He said these men fought with such determination to protect their newfound food supply, no doubt, that they were able to blunt the attack. There was no way these men were giving up this food for a sea ration retreat, much less surrender. Herman carried shrapnel with him for the rest of his life. Whether he was wounded in this particular action or not, I don't recall him mentioning, but he received more than one Purple Heart. But problems plagued him from time to time, and as a result, he spent considerable vacations at veterans' hospitals. Complications could flare up at almost any time. Perhaps during these stays he encountered the less fortunate who would become the passion of his later years. After the war, Nick worked as a gourmet chef, eventually becoming a troubleshooter for the Sheraton Corporation. He organized and reorganized some of the most famous kitchens worldwide from Paris to Vegas, and spoke of having served politicians, actors, mobsters, often at the same table. Most memorable was when he prepared specialty dinners for a future Attorney General of the United States and his brother-in-law, an actor of some renown, the head of the Teamsters Union, a certain actor from California before he got into politics, and the mayor of a major Midwestern city. They were all friendly with one another, and according to Mr. Nick, met every so often to make sure they were all on the same page. Those patrons are all gone now. He sometimes mused as to the significance of these meetings. Upon his retirement, he put his considerable culinary and scavenging skills, one of his traits from the military, to work feeding and helping the less fortunate. Mr. Nick was a familiar sight at local supermarkets, restaurants, and farms, not necessarily as a patron, but as a gleaner. He took whatever surplus or marginal quality food was available and distributed it to anyone in need. Food pantries as we know them today were only then getting organized. He never refused anything unless he feared it would go to waste. More than once, he told me to hold something for an associate to retrieve later. Herman always knew where something could be used, whether it was potatoes, bread, or foie gras. I also learned that he took the food least likely to survive distribution and prepared it himself, either at a soup kitchen or even in his own home, before handing it out. His skills were nothing short of phenomenal, as I bore witness to on more than one occasion. This guy really knew how to cook. To Herman, quality food had nothing to do with its cost, only that you did with it what we did with it, and more importantly, that you wasted nothing. On one occasion, I accompanied him on a distribution run. He showed me families living out of their vehicles, in tents, barns, working families. I'm sure my reaction was like most. I would have never known. His response, most prefer not to know. Herman Nichols' fight for the less fortunate was more than a personal battle. He teamed up with various church and civic groups, often dipping into his own personal resources. Some years back, the date escapes me now, he was honored by the Junior League of Pittsfield as their Volunteer of the Year, an honor he well deserved. The evening the award was presented, he hobbled to the podium with the support of 2 canes and one of his daughters. The day before the presentation, he had been released from the hospital, one of his shrapnel vacations. That same morning, with the help of family and friends, he had been distributing food. Herman will be missed by more than just a good friend from Great Barrington. My solace will have to be that his skills were needed more, somewhere beyond this plane of existence. Bon appetit, my friend. Thank you.